Cowrie shells. For thousands of years, people didn't use coins or paper to trade. In many parts of Asia and Africa, they used cowrie shells. These little shells were smooth, shiny, and looked almost like natural coins. They were light to carry, easy to count, and tough to break, which made them perfect for everyday trade. You could buy food, pay taxes, or even purchase land with them. Cowries became so important that they spread across continents. In China, they were one of the earliest recognized forms of currency. In Africa, kingdoms like Mali and Ghana used them in large-scale trade, sometimes even for gold or slaves. But there was a catch. When European traders brought massive amounts of cowrie shells into Africa during the slave trade, the market flooded. Suddenly, something that once had great value became much less special. Inflation set in, and the shells lost much of their power as money. Even so, cowrie shells were one of the longest-lasting forms of currency in human history. They show how something small could link economies across continents, creating one of the earliest global currencies. Yap Stones. On the tiny Pacific island of Yap, people used money that was almost impossible to carry. They traded with giant stone discs called rye stones. Some of these stones were small enough to lift, but many were huge. They were taller than a person and weighing several tons. Moving them often required dozens of men, canoes, and weeks of travel. The value of a stone wasn't just about size, it also depended on how hard it was to get, and the story behind it. If someone died bringing a stone across the sea, that stone became even more valuable. What made this system interesting is that the stones didn't always move. If ownership changed, everyone in the community simply agreed that the stone now belonged to someone else, even if it stayed in the same spot. In one case, a stone sank to the bottom of the ocean during transport, but people still treated it as a valid currency because everyone knew it was there. Stone money shows that currency isn't just about convenience. It's about trust, shared belief, and community memory. On Yap, a giant stone by the side of the road could be as good as gold in the bank. Tea bricks. In ancient China, people found a way to turn something they already loved into money. Tea. Tea leaves were pressed into hard bricks, making them easy to carry, stack, and store. Unlike fragile coins or heavy stones, tea bricks were light and practical. You could even break off pieces to make smaller payments. These bricks weren't just money, they were also useful. If you didn't want to spend them, you could simply boil them in water and drink the tea. That gave them real value, which made people trust them even more. Tea bricks became popular in parts of China, Mongolia, and Tibet, where they were accepted for trade and taxes. For nomadic groups traveling long distances, carrying money you could also drink was the perfect solution. Eventually, coins and paper currency replaced tea bricks. But it's pretty wild when you think about it. Imagine walking into a shop today and paying with something you could brew into your evening tea. That's money you could literally sip, whale teeth. In places like Fiji, people use something very unusual as money, whale teeth. They weren't just pieces of bone. Whale teeth, called tabua, carried deep cultural meaning. They were polished, shiny, and rare, which made them valuable for trade. But more than that, they symbolized respect, honor, and trust. In Fiji, whale teeth weren't used for everyday purchases like food or clothing. Instead, they were exchanged during important events, weddings, political agreements, or when making peace between groups. Giving someone a whale tooth wasn't just a payment, it was a powerful gesture. Over time, European traders also started using whale teeth to do business in the Pacific Islands. They quickly realized how important these objects were in local culture, and they became a bridge between different worlds of trade. Whale teeth show us that money doesn't always have to be practical or easy to spend. Sometimes it's about meaning, tradition, and the respect that comes with the exchange. Cocoa beans. In ancient Mesoamerica, civilizations like the Maya and Aztecs used cocoa beans as money. These beans weren't just valuable for trade, they were also prized for making chocolate, which was seen as a drink of the gods. Because cocoa was both desirable and limited, it became a trusted currency. People used the beans to buy food, clothes, and even pay taxes. For example, a few dozen beans could get you a simple meal, while hundreds of beans could buy you a slave. That shows how central cocoa was to their economy. But like many forms of money, cocoa beans had problems. They could spoil, or insects could eat them. And when harvests were big, too many beans in circulation meant their value dropped. Still, cocoa beans are a perfect example of how something both useful and enjoyable can become money, and how people's love for chocolate once fueled an entire economy. Salt slabs. In parts of Africa, especially Ethiopia, People once used salt slabs as money. These large blocks of salt, called amoli, weren't just valuable, they were essential for life. Salt was needed to preserve food, keep people healthy, and even for livestock. That made it a perfect form of currency. Nomadic tribes carried these heavy slabs across long distances to trade for grains, animals, or other goods. Some slabs were so big and heavy that moving them could take days, and transporting them safely was a real challenge. To make smaller trades easier, people sometimes cut the slabs into pieces. Salt was so precious it earned nicknames like white gold. It was more than money, it was a necessity. Wars and raids sometimes centered around controlling salt supplies, showing just how important it was to communities. Even into the 20th century, salt slabs were still used in some remote areas. And here's something that might surprise you. The very word salary comes from the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in it. So in a way, every paycheck today still carries the history of salt money. Cigarettes. Sometimes when regular money isn't available, people turn to unusual things, like cigarettes. Cigarettes have served as currency in many situations where cash was scarce or worthless. During World War II, for example, prisoners of war used them to buy food, favors, or extra supplies. One cigarette could get you a meal, a clean shirt, or a small service from a fellow prisoner. Why cigarettes? They were portable, durable, and everyone wanted them. Unlike coins, you could carry dozens without it being heavy, and they were easy to divide or trade in smaller portions. Even after the war, cigarettes continued to act as informal money in some countries facing shortages or inflation. In fact, this use of cigarettes was studied so closely that it even inspired early economic models of supply and demand. Gold. Gold has been used as money for thousands of years, and it's easy to see why. Gold excels as money because its high stock-to-flow ratio means new supply grows very slowly relative to existing reserves. This predictable scarcity limits inflation, preserves purchasing power, and resists manipulation. It's rare, shiny, and doesn't rust or break. That made it perfect for storing value over time. Ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans used gold coins for trade, taxes, and even paying soldiers. Gold's value isn't just about appearance. Societies agreed it represented wealth, so it could be traded for food, land, or luxury goods. When paper money emerged, banks and governments issued notes backed by gold reserves, which were redeemable for gold on demand. This convertibility, the gold standard, anchored trust and shaped global economies for centuries. Of course, gold has its downsides. It's heavy, easy to steal, and mining it can be dangerous. But despite that, it became the standard for wealth and currency worldwide. Even today, when most money is digital, gold still carries the same trust and power it always has. Cheese. In Italy, money sometimes comes in a surprisingly tasty form, cheese. Specifically, Parmigiano Reggiano wheels have been used as collateral for bank loans. These giant wheels take months to produce and years to age, which makes them valuable and reliable. Farmers and producers could use them to secure credit, trade for goods, or even pay debts, almost like a natural form of currency. Cheese has some advantages that make it surprisingly practical as money. It lasts a long time if stored properly, its value is widely recognized, and unlike coins or paper, it can also be consumed or sold for profit. In some rural communities, a well-aged wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano could be worth more than a bag of coins. It's a reminder that money doesn't always need to be metal, paper, or digital. If people trust it, even a wheel of cheese can serve as currency. Feathers. In some cultures, even something as delicate as a feather has been used as money. For example, in parts of New Guinea, rare bird feathers, especially from birds of paradise, were highly prized. These feathers weren't just beautiful, they carried deep cultural and social value. Wearing or owning certain feathers could show wealth, status, or achievements in the community. People traded feathers for food, tools, or other goods, and the rarer the feather, the more it was worth. Because of their high value, some communities developed careful ways to measure and compare feathers to make sure trades were fair. Feathers could even be saved or passed down as a form of long-term wealth. So next time you see a fancy feather in a hat or decoration, think about this. In some places, that delicate plume could have bought you a meal, a tool, or even a place in society. Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital money. It doesn't exist as coins or paper, but as entries in a public record that anyone can check. No bank or government runs it. Instead, thousands of computers agree on the same ledger and follow the same rules. This ledger is called a blockchain. Think of it like a shared notebook. Every approximately 10 minutes, a new page, block, is added with recent payments. Special computers called miners race to add the next page by solving hard puzzles. The winner adds the block and earns newly created Bitcoin plus fees. Bitcoin is scarce by design. There will never be more than 21 million. New coins are released on a fixed schedule that slows down about every 4 years, a halving. This slow release increases its stock-to-flow ratio, pushing it toward, and at times beyond, levels historically reached only by gold. This predictable supply makes Bitcoin feel like digital gold. Using it is simple in idea. A wallet holds a secret code, a private key, that proves the coins are yours. You can send Bitcoin anywhere in the world in minutes without permission. It's highly divisible, down to 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, a Satoshi. So tiny payments are possible. It's not perfect. The price moves a lot, fees and confirmation times can vary, and if you lose your key, there's no help desk. Not everyone accepts it yet. Still, Bitcoin shows that money can be pure information, secured by math and shared rules rather than rulers.